What if one of Steve Perry's most beautiful ballads wasn't just a love song, but a warning? Foolish Heart carried a secret, one that revealed the pain, the mystery, and the heartbreak Perry tried to keep hidden. The song that broke the silence. In 1984, Steve Perry stood at a crossroads. After years of fronting Journey, the band that had become one of the biggest rock acts in the world, he decided to step out on his own with his first solo record, Street Talk. The move shocked fans. Why would the voice of Don't Stop Believin' and Open Arms risk going solo when Journey was still riding high? The answer came in the music itself. Street Talk wasn't just a side project. It was Perry's way of proving that his artistry went beyond stadium anthems and power ballads. The record gave us the upbeat smash Oh Sherrie, but tucked between the radio-friendly tracks was a song that sounded nothing like the rest, a quiet ballad with a trembling kind of honesty. Foolish Heart. The difference was striking. While Oh Sherrie burned with passion and energy, Foolish Heart felt fragile, almost hesitant. It was a song stripped bare of spectacle, built instead on delicate keys and Perry's restrained vocals. Rather than soaring to impossible heights, his voice lingered in a vulnerable middle ground, as if he were deliberately holding back. It didn't sound like the Steve Perry who could electrify arenas. It sounded like the private Steve Perry, someone cautiously confessing a truth he hadn't told anyone else. The lyrics deepened that impression. Lines like, "Foolish heart, hear me calling, stop before you start falling," weren't declarations of love, they were warnings. The song wasn't about being swept away. It was about guarding yourself, about speaking to your own heart as though it were a fragile friend on the edge of another mistake. Fans had never heard Perry sound this exposed. That exposure hit hard. To listeners, it felt like he was pulling back the curtain, even if just a little. After years of watching him dominate the stage with Journey, Foolish Heart made people stop and wonder. Who was behind the walls Perry so carefully built around his personal life? Was he singing to Sherrie Swafford, his then girlfriend, and the muse behind Oh Sherrie? Or was this about someone else, an untold love that left deeper scars? Whatever the truth, Foolish Heart became more than just a track on his solo album. It was the first real glimpse of Steve Perry, not the rock star, but the man. Perry's hidden heartache. When Steve Perry stepped out with his debut solo album Street Talk in 1984, the expectations were sky high. He wasn't just any singer testing the waters on his own. He was already one of the most recognizable voices in rock. Journey had dominated the charts with Escape and Frontiers, delivering stadium-shaking anthems like Don't Stop Believin' and Separate Ways. For Perry to step away, even briefly, was a bold move that left fans wondering what he had to prove. And yet, instead of leaning solely on bombastic arena rock, Perry took a risk. He chose vulnerability. Among the up-tempo tracks like She's Mine and the instantly catchy Oh Sherrie, there was one song that stood apart: Foolish Heart. From the first notes, it felt different. Stripped back, simple and raw, the song was built less on flashy production and more on emotion. The gentle keyboard opening and Perry's restrained vocal delivery gave listeners something unexpected, a quiet confession from a man known for soaring power. It was as if Perry had stepped down from the arena stage and into a room with just one person, the listener. The lyrics didn't read like an optimistic love letter. They sounded like a plea, almost a warning. Foolish heart, hear me calling. Stop before you start falling. This wasn't about new love. It was about scars from old wounds. Perry seemed to be speaking to himself, coaching his own heart not to repeat past mistakes. Fans who were used to hearing him belt out anthems of perseverance now heard something much more fragile, and it landed with impact. Listeners who had walked through heartbreak recognized their own stories in his words. The song tapped into a universal fear. What happens when you've loved and lost, and you're terrified of opening up again? Critics noticed the shift too. While some dismissed the song as too soft, others praised Perry for revealing a side of himself the public had never seen. Unlike Oh Sherrie, which had a direct muse and was filled with romantic energy, Foolish Heart sounded like it came from a darker, more personal place. It wasn't just about a woman, it was about Perry's own battle with trust, vulnerability, and the walls he built around himself. Fans began to speculate. Was this song connected to the struggles he faced balancing fame and his personal life? Or was it a hidden window into his complicated relationship with Sherrie Swafford? Whatever the truth was, one thing became clear. Perry had turned his private wounds into a universal ballad. And perhaps that's why Foolish Heart resonated so deeply. At a time when the charts were filled with glossy love songs, Perry delivered something hauntingly honest. He wasn't telling fans how love should feel. He was showing them what it feels like to protect a heart that's already been broken. But even with all that emotion pouring through the speakers, fans still wanted to know, who was he really singing to? Rumors of lost love. By the time Foolish Heart hit the airwaves, one name kept surfacing whenever Steve Perry's love life was mentioned: Sherrie Swafford. She wasn't just a passing rumor, she was the woman immortalized in his hit Oh Sherrie. Fans had seen her in the music video, and for a moment, their love looked like the kind of fairy tale rock stars only dream about. But when Foolish Heart arrived, listeners couldn't help but notice the drastic change in tone. Where Oh Sherrie was alive with passion and joy, Foolish Heart felt weighed down, almost mournful. It sounded like the aftermath of a storm, the reflection that comes once the sparks have burned out. Naturally, fans began to wonder if the song was Perry's way of processing the cracks forming in his relationship with Sherrie. The timing seemed suspicious. While Perry never confirmed the exact inspiration, insiders often hinted that his romance with Sherrie had become strained by the demands of fame, endless touring, and his inability to balance love with life on the road. The intensity of being the voice of Journey left little room for normalcy, and many speculated that Sherrie was caught in the middle of a tug-of-war between Perry the man and Perry the star. Lyrics like "Foolish Heart, heed my warning" suddenly sounded less like poetic musings and more like Perry's way of telling himself not to dive too deep again. It wasn't the language of a man basking in new love. It was the guarded voice of someone who had been burned. But the rumors didn't stop with Sherrie. Whispers in fan circles suggested that Perry might have had other private romances the public never knew about. Some even speculated that the song was about a relationship so personal, so sacred to him, that he deliberately kept it buried under layers of secrecy. Because if Oh Sherrie had been a bold, open declaration of love, then Foolish Heart felt like the exact opposite. A song he almost didn't want anyone to hear, but needed to release. Fans latched onto this contrast, often debating whether the song was Perry's breakup anthem to Sherrie, or a reflection of a deeper wound that remained hidden from the spotlight. The beauty of Foolish Heart is that it left room for interpretation. It didn't point fingers or call out names. Instead, it captured the universal ache of heartbreak, the quiet moment after the end of a relationship when you're still piecing yourself back together. And maybe that's why the speculation never died down. Because Foolish Heart wasn't just about Steve Perry. It was about anyone who had ever loved too deeply and paid the price. Fans projected their own heartbreaks onto the song, but they also couldn't shake the feeling that Perry was giving them a rare glimpse into his own broken heart. Still, romance wasn't the only thing weighing him down. Behind the rumors of lost love, Perry was grappling with something much bigger: the crushing loneliness of fame. The lonely side of fame. Heartbreak alone is heavy enough, but for Steve Perry, the weight was magnified by the spotlight he lived under. By the mid-'80s, he wasn't just a rock star. He was the voice of Journey, the man whose vocals had carried songs like Open Arms and Faithfully into the cultural canon. On stage, he was larger than life. Off stage, though, the reality was far lonelier. The relentless touring schedules took their toll. Nights blurred together in hotel rooms, and even in front of tens of thousands of screaming fans, Perry often felt isolated. It was the paradox of fame, being worshipped by millions but truly known by none. For someone as private as Perry, this gap between public adoration and personal emptiness only deepened the sense of loneliness. That loneliness echoed in Foolish Heart. The song wasn't just a warning to avoid romantic pain. It was a cry from someone who had already given so much of himself to music and fame that he wasn't sure if he had anything left to give another person. He had poured his soul into performances, into the endless cycle of creating, recording, and touring, and what he got in return was exhaustion and distance from the people he cared about. Friends and bandmates often describe Perry as sensitive, even fragile beneath the rock star image. He wasn't the type to shrug off emotions or drown them in reckless behavior. Instead, he internalized them, carrying his heartbreak and his loneliness quietly. To fans, Foolish Heart became a love ballad. But to Perry, it may have also been the soundtrack to his life behind closed doors, where silence, doubt, and fear replaced the roar of the crowd. The more success he achieved, the more walls he seemed to build around himself. Love required vulnerability, and vulnerability was something he could no longer risk, not when the world already demanded so much of him. And the industry didn't make it any easier, because while Perry was struggling with isolation, the pressure to deliver hits only grew stronger. Industry pressure and Perry's walls. While Steve Perry was wrestling with heartbreak and isolation, another force loomed over him: the music industry. To record executives, Perry wasn't just a man with feelings. He was a commodity. He was the voice that sold out stadiums, the voice that guaranteed platinum records, the voice they could bank on to keep Journey's dominance alive. Vulnerability was powerful for fans, but for the industry, it had to be packaged in a way that sold. This created a constant tug of war. Perry longed to write from the heart, to pour real pain into his music, but the label often pushed for songs that could climb the charts: radio hits, arena anthems, safe choices. In that climate, a ballad like Foolish Heart was a risk. It wasn't the upbeat declaration of Oh Sherrie, nor the sweeping stadium-ready sound of Journey. It was quiet, fragile, almost uncommercial. Yet, that's what made it unforgettable. Perry wasn't singing to please executives, he was singing to survive. His lyrics became a shield, a way of saying, "I'll give you the music, but you can't have all of me." The song's cautionary tone mirrored the way he began to guard his emotions off stage. To protect himself, he built walls, letting very few people into his inner circle. This balancing act was exhausting. Behind the polished image, Perry was fighting two battles, one with his own foolish heart and one with an industry that demanded constant output. To keep delivering hits while staying true to his pain was nearly impossible, and it showed in the tension that often surrounded his career decisions. But despite all the pressure, Foolish Heart became one of his most defining solo moments. Fans didn't just hear a ballad, they heard honesty, and that honesty was more powerful than any radio-friendly formula. Still, what made the song endure wasn't only the industry risk Perry took, it was the way it connected with listeners on a deeply personal level. People didn't just listen to it, they felt it, and that emotional legacy would only grow stronger over time. The song's emotional legacy. When Foolish Heart first hit the airwaves, it was easy to underestimate. It didn't explode with guitars or deliver the kind of soaring hook that defined Journey's biggest hits. Instead, it crept in quietly, almost cautiously, much like the message within the lyrics. But that quietness was its strength. It gave listeners space to sit with their own emotions, and in doing so, it carved out a legacy far bigger than anyone expected. Fans connected with it instantly because it spoke to something universal: the fear of being hurt again. For anyone who had walked through heartbreak, the song felt like a mirror. The lyrics didn't sugarcoat love or dress it up as a fantasy. Instead, they acknowledged the scars we carry, the hesitation we feel, and the voice inside that whispers, "Don't make the same mistake twice." Through the decades, Foolish Heart became more than just a song. It became a comfort. Couples going through breakups clung to it. People who had lost loved ones found their own grief hidden in Perry's words. And for those on the edge of new love, it served as both a warning and a reassurance. Love is worth chasing, but it comes with risk. What made it even more timeless was Perry's delivery. He didn't oversing, he didn't rely on vocal fireworks. He sang as though he was letting us in on a secret, and that intimacy is what made the song endure. Unlike many ballads of the era, which faded once trends shifted, Foolish Heart continued to find new audiences, passed down from vinyl to CD, from radio to streaming playlists. Today, the song stands as one of Perry's most human moments. It's less about chart success and more about emotional survival, even without a definitive answer to who it was about: Sherrie, another hidden romance, or simply Perry himself. The ambiguity kept it alive in conversations. Fans still debate its true meaning, but that mystery only adds to its power. In the end, Foolish Heart proved that vulnerability could be just as enduring as strength. It showed that a rock icon didn't have to belt out an anthem to leave a mark. Sometimes, the quietest confessions echo the loudest. And decades later, people still wonder, what secret was Steve Perry really hiding when he sang those words? Maybe the real secret behind Foolish Heart isn't who it was written for, but how it revealed Steve Perry's most vulnerable side. A voice that once shook stadiums suddenly whispered the truth of heartbreak, and that honesty is why the song still cuts deep today. So what do you think? Was it about Sherrie, another hidden love, or simply Perry himself? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit subscribe to Backstage Melody, where the stories behind the music are always deeper than you imagined.